I found out my mother had been secretly cashing my disabled son's benefits for over a decade when I walked into the Social Security office on my lunch break, clutching a plastic folder of medical records and school reports, ready to argue with some bored government worker about why my kids still needed help. And the woman behind the glass looked at her screen, frowned, and said, "Ma'am, I can't change the representative payee without your mother present." And for a second I thought I'd misheard her, because in what universe was my 62-year-old mother the one legally in charge of my son's money when I'm the one taking him to therapy at 7 a.m. and fighting insurance on my 10-minute work breaks? I work front desk at a dentist's office. It's not glamorous, but it's stable, and it lets me get my son Noah to his appointments. He's 9 on the spectrum, epileptic, and uses an adaptive stroller on bad days when sensory overload wipes him out. We've been living on the edge of I don't know how I'm going to pay for this for as long as I can remember, so when the school social worker suggested we reevaluate his SSI benefits because he might qualify for a higher rate now that his seizure activity has increased, I thought, great, maybe I can finally stop choosing between OT copays and decent groceries. I pulled our old paperwork out of a file box, saw that the last big update was when he was 3, and realized my mom had handled most of it back then because I was drowning in diapers and night shifts and panic. I vaguely remembered signing a form in her minivan outside the SSA office while Noah screamed in his car seat, and she said, "Just sign where I highlighted, honey, we'll handle it. This is too confusing for you right now." And at the time that had felt like help. So I took a number, sat in a plastic chair that smelled like old coffee and disappointment, and when they called Collins Noah, I went up to the window ready to advocate. "I'd like to update my son's file," I told the worker, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Ramirez according to her badge. "His diagnoses have changed, and his therapist said we might be eligible for a higher benefit." She typed for a minute, eyes flicking across the screen. "Okay," she said. "I see here he's been receiving benefits consistently since 2014. You're his mother, correct?" "Yes," I said. "And you're the representative payee?" she asked. "I should be," I said, confused. "We may have filed under my mom's address years ago because I was moving around a lot, but I'm the one who—" She shook her head. "It lists Carol Collins as the representative payee," she said. "That means she's the one legally responsible for managing his benefits. If you want to change that to yourself, we'll need her here, or proof that she's unwilling or unable to continue, or a formal complaint." "I'm sorry," I said slowly, feeling the back of my neck go hot. "Did you say he's been receiving benefits since 2014? "Yes," she said. "Continuously. There were a couple of redeterminations, but he's been approved each time. The payment record shows monthly disbursements." The room swayed for a second. "Because I've never seen that money," I heard myself say. "I thought we got denied when he was 3. My mom said they said his case wasn't severe enough, and that we shouldn't expect anything." Mrs. Ramirez's fingers paused on the keyboard. She looked up at me, really looked, in a way that made my stomach drop. "You've never seen any of it?" she repeated. "No," I said. "I've been working 2 jobs off and on for years to keep the lights on. My mom helps with babysitting, yeah, but no, I have never seen a check or a card or anything with his name on it." She sighed, that bone-deep tired sound you hear from people who see the same ugly thing over and over. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to print you a payment history, and then I'm going to give you a form to request a change of payee. You understand that if there has been misuse of funds, we are required to investigate." The printer started chattering. She handed me a few sheets of paper. There it was in black and white, monthly payments every month for 12 years going to an account ending in numbers I didn't recognize. Same amount like clockwork. Thousands and thousands of dollars that had never touched my hands. "That account number," I said, throat dry. "Can you tell me whose that is?" "I can't give you specifics," she said. "But if your mother has ever shown you her bank statements, you might recognize it." I did recognize it. Not right then because my brain was in too much of a fog, but later that night when I dug cold, crumpled bank receipts out of the junk drawer in my parents' kitchen. It was hers. Same last 4 digits printed on the torn piece of paper she'd scribbled a grocery list on. Same account she used for everything. Thank you, I told Mrs. Ramirez in a voice that didn't sound like mine. She slid another form under the glass. This is the request for change of payee, she said. Fill it out, bring it back with proof that you are his custodial parent and that he lives with you. We'll also need to see your mother, or evidence that she can't manage things. She hesitated. If you believe there's been misuse, there's another form. It's serious. It can trigger an investigation. I'm required to tell you that. What happens to the person if there's misuse? I asked. Depends, she said. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes they have to pay it back. In extreme cases, there can be criminal charges. But the priority is making sure the beneficiary is taken care of. The beneficiary? My kid. Noah, who still sleeps with the dinosaur blanket my mom knitted him, who thinks grandma is just a little strict when she sighs about my poor life choices in front of him. I took the forms. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to shove them into my pockets so I wouldn't drop anything. I don't remember the drive back to my parents' house. I know I must have hit every red light, because the anger building in my chest had too much time to boil. For context, I had Noah when I was 19 with a boyfriend who bailed halfway through my second trimester. I was working at a grocery store, taking community college classes at night, and living in a crappy apartment with 2 roommates and a mouse problem. When I called my mom sobbing because my car had broken down and I just found out the baby might have heart issues, she showed up the next day with my dad and a moving truck. You're coming home, she announced, marching around my tiny apartment like a general. You can't do this alone. It's not safe. It's not godly. Pack your things. I resisted for about 10 minutes. Then I looked at the stack of unpaid bills, the broken heater, the way my ankles were swelling, and I gave in. Just for a little while, I told myself. Just until the baby's born. Just until I get back on my feet. Spoiler. I never really got back on my feet in that house. My mom took over everything. She scheduled the OB appointments, drove me there, filled out the forms, always with this running commentary about how lucky I was to have parents who cared enough to step in. When Noah was born early and spent 3 weeks in the NICU, she never left my side and made sure I knew it. Most girls like you would be signing their babies over to the state right now, she'd say, stroking his hair. But we're not most families. We'll make this work. When he started missing milestones and the doctors mentioned developmental delays and possible seizure activity, she was the one who put on her battle face and marched us through appointments. I was grateful and exhausted and ashamed. I'd already internalized the idea that I'd messed up by having a baby with no husband and no degree. She hammered it home every time she saved the day. You're lucky I'm organized, she'd say when she laid out his meds. You're lucky we're here. So when she said we should apply for benefits to help with his extra expenses, and that she'd handle the red tape, I let her. She called Social Security while I was at work, left forms on the counter with post-it notes that said sign here, hustled me and a screaming 3-year-old into the car one morning to drop something off at the office, and shoved a clipboard into my lap while we sat in the parking lot. It's all filled out, she said. You're just signing because you're his mom. They need your signature. I signed. I was sleep-deprived, smelling like spit-up, more worried about whether we'd have money for his next anticonvulsant refill than about the fine print on some government form. After that, she said we got denied. They said he doesn't qualify, she told me, tucking a generic-looking letter into a folder I never saw again. The government doesn't care about kids like Noah unless they're practically dying. We'll manage. We always do. For the next 9 years, managing meant me working as many hours as I could get at low-paying jobs, taking whatever shift allowed me to juggle school drop-offs, therapy appointments, and grandma's increasing needs. It meant clipping coupons, filling out charity forms at the hospital, letting Noah's sneakers get too tight before buying new ones because the money just wasn't there. It meant listening to my mom complain about how no one ever helps, while she refused to let my dad get a second job because Your father's back can't take it. We lived in their small house, me and Noah in the converted dining room because my old bedroom had become storage. The rule was simple. I didn't pay rent, but in exchange I did everything. I cooked dinner most nights, did laundry, cleaned, and took primary responsibility for Noah's care. We're giving you a roof over your head, they'd say whenever I looked tired. That's worth more than any paycheck. So sitting at their kitchen table that afternoon, Noah at school, Dad at rehab, papers spread out like a crime scene, I felt my whole body buzzing. My mom walked in from the backyard, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Did you fill out the forms?" she asked, cheerful in that way that is always a little too loud. "I'm thinking I'll go with you next time they know me down there." "We don't need to update anything," I said, holding up the payment history. Because according to Social Security, Noah's been getting benefits this whole time. Her mouth snapped shut. Her eyes flicked to the papers back to my face. "Well," she said after a beat, "of course he has. I told you we got it sorted eventually." "No," I said. "You told me we got denied. You told me the government doesn't care about kids like Noah. You said there was nothing else to be done." She shrugged, a jerky little movement. "I didn't want you obsessing over numbers we couldn't change," she said. "You were already anxious enough." "Really?" I said. "Because these numbers," I slapped the papers down, "have changed a lot over the years. To the tune of, what is this, like 40 grand? 50? She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "It's not that much once you break it down. Do you know how expensive it is to keep a roof over your head and his? To feed a growing boy? To drive him to appointments? That's what that money has gone to. Household expenses. Groceries. Gas. Things you act like just appear. Household expenses," I repeated. "On your account. With your name on it. While I thought we had nothing. While I was maxing out a credit card to pay for Noah's speech therapy, because the waiting list for the free clinic was 6 months long. We paid off that card," she said. "Eventually." "Using his money," I said. Something flickered in her eyes then. Guilt, anger, both. "It's all one pot, Samantha," she said, switching to the tone she uses in Bible study. "Family resources. It doesn't matter which account it goes into. We've all been sacrificing." "I've been sacrificing," I said. "You've been siphoning. There's a difference." She slammed her hand down on the table. "Watch your mouth," she snapped. "I am the one who stayed home with you. With him. Your father would have left years ago if it wasn't for me holding this family together. I have earned every penny that comes through this house. If some of it has my grandson's name on it, well, that's because the Lord provides in mysterious ways. The Lord didn't fill out these forms," I said. "You did. You signed as his representative payee and did not tell me. You lied. You said we were denied and you pocketed the money." "Pocketed?" she scoffed. "Oh, please. You think I'm out buying diamonds? Look around, Sam. Do you see luxury? Do you see fancy vacations? I buy groceries. I pay the light bill. I keep the car running. And yes, sometimes I get my hair done or buy myself a new blouse. I'm allowed to feel human too." "Not with my kids' benefits," I said. "That money is supposed to go to him. For him. He lives here," she shot back. "He eats food I cook, sleeps under a roof we pay for, uses electricity we pay for to run his little TV. That's all for him. You act like I'm stealing from a stranger." "You're stealing from your grandson," I said. "And from me. And from every future of his where we might have had the savings to move somewhere better or buy equipment without begging a charity." She crossed her arms. "If you feel that way," she said coolly, "you're welcome to start paying market rent. We can draw up a lease. You think this house is free." That night, after I got Noah to bed, I sat on the floor with the SSA forms in front of me. Noah's door was cracked open so I could hear if he had a seizure. My parents' TV hummed down the hall. It felt like I was sitting at the edge of a cliff. If I filled out the misuse form, if I checked the little box that said, "I believe the payee has misused funds," It wouldn't just be a complaint. It would be an accusation. It would trigger an investigation that could end with my mother having to repay tens of thousands of dollars she absolutely did not have. Could mean fines. Could mean charges. It could mean my mother, who taught Sunday school and made casseroles for every funeral in a 5-mile radius, sitting in a courtroom while someone read out her bank statements. I thought about all the ways she'd helped. Sitting with Noah in the ER at 2 a.m. when he had his first big seizure. Rocking him on her lap when he was colicky so I could shower. Driving my exhausted self to work and back when my car finally died, and we couldn't afford another one yet. All real. All true. All tangled up with this other truth. The time she told me we couldn't afford more therapy sessions when we actually could have, if she'd used his SSI for him instead of household expenses. The time she refused to let me buy noise-canceling headphones for him because, why would we spend $90 on something like that when you can just teach him to toughen up? The time she said in a tired, irritated voice, "Sometimes I wish we'd never applied for those benefits. They barely cover what I put into this house." While I stood there thinking we never got them at all, I filled out the misuse form. My hand shook, but I did it. I wrote, "I did not know my mother was the payee. I was told my son was denied benefits. I believe funds were used for general household expenses and not specifically for my son, and I was not given access to records." I signed my name. The next day on my lunch break, I went back to SSA and slid the form under the glass. Mrs. Ramirez read it, nodded once, and stapled it to the payment history. "We'll be in touch," she said. "In the meantime, we can start the process of making you the payee." A week later, my mother got a letter from Social Security. She stormed into my room waving it like a flag. "What did you do?" she demanded. "They're asking for receipts. They want bank statements. They say there are questions about how the funds have been used." I told them the truth, I said. That I didn't know Noah had been getting benefits and that I never saw a cent. "How dare you," she hissed. "After everything I have done, you're going to sick the government on me? They could put me in jail. Do you want your grandmother's friends from church reading in the paper that I'm some kind of criminal? I want my son taken care of," I said. "I want to know that the money with his name on it is being used for him, not for you to tithe above your means or buy Mark's kids Christmas presents big enough to impress their mother. Mark is my younger brother by 3 years and the golden child. He works off and on as a mechanic, lives 20 minutes away with his ex and their 2 kids, never once has to worry about being guilt for not visiting because my mom will drive to him." "You are ungrateful," she said, voice shaking. "You think those therapists magically appear? You think the heat stays on by prayer alone? Who do you think has kept this house running while you flit from job to job, from crisis to crisis? If I go down, we all go down." "No," I said. "If you go down, it will be because you took money that wasn't yours and used it however you pleased." My father finally spoke up from the doorway where he'd been hovering, his cane tapping the floor. "Enough," he said. "Sam, you know your mother has always done her best. Maybe she made some mistakes, but she's kept a roof over our heads." "She kept a roof over her head," I said. "With his money. You knew, didn't you?" He looked away. "I saw the statements," he said after a moment. "I assumed you knew too. You live here. You eat here." "I knew we were all broke," I said. "I did not know there was an extra check every month with Noah's name on it. I would have made different choices if I had." "Like what?" my mother snapped. "Run off to some apartment you can't afford? Leave us to deal with his episodes alone? You have no idea how hard this is." "I do," I said, "because I'm the one at every appointment. I'm the one getting called when he melts down at school. I'm the one sleeping on the floor next to his bed after a seizure. You help, yeah, but you don't own him." SSA's investigation took months. They requested bank statements, receipts, explanations. My mother called me almost every day, alternating between sobbing and screaming. "They're treating me like a thief," she'd cry. "They're making me account for every cent. I can't remember what we spent at Walmart in 2016. That's the point, I said. If you had kept records like you were supposed to, this wouldn't be so hard. You're doing this to punish me, she said. Because you resent that we brought you home when you got pregnant. I resent that you lied, I said. That you used my son like a second job and never told me. She dropped off a stack of photocopied receipts one afternoon and said, "Here, you sort them if you care so much." I sorted them. There were some legitimate things. Prescriptions, a weighted blanket, gas receipts clearly tied to neurology appointments. There were also salon charges, restaurant bills from nights out with her friends, big box store receipts with line items like 75 TV and patio set. Were those for him? I texted her attaching pictures. No reply. Finally, SSA sent 2 letters. One to her, one to me. Mine said I'd been approved as the new representative payee. Going forward, Noah's benefits would be paid onto a debit card in my name. It also said they had identified potential misuse of prior funds and would be pursuing recovery from the previous payee. Hers said she owed several $1,000s. Not the full amount. That would have bankrupted her 100 times over, but enough to hurt. Enough to be a consequence. She showed up at my door with the letter crumpled in her fist. "Are you happy now?" she spat. "They want it back. They say I misused funds. Like I'm some stranger off the street. Like I didn't raise that boy with these 2 hands." "You raised him," I said. "With my help. With his money. You can't have it both ways, Mom. Either it was all for him, in which case you should have records, or you treated it like extra household cash, in which case this." "They could take the house," she said, voice shaking. "Your father is sick. Where are we supposed to go?" "Maybe you should have thought about that before you spent it on TVs and vacations you told me were paid for by your couponing," I said. "We can work out a payment plan," my dad said, trying to calm her. "They can't get blood from a stone." But the story didn't stop at our front door. In a town like ours, nothing does. My mother, who could have kept her mouth shut and handled it quietly, chose martyrdom instead. She told anyone who would listen that her own daughter reported her to the government over a misunderstanding, that the state is trying to put an old woman in jail because her ungrateful child complained, that she only ever used that money to feed and house her grandson. People took sides. My Aunt Linda called me screaming, asking how I could turn on family like that. "She stole from a disabled child," I said. "Do you hear yourself? She raised that disabled child while you ran around trying to find yourself," she snapped. "You always were dramatic." "I was 19, I said. "I was working 2 jobs. I lived in their house." "Exactly," she said. "You owed them." That word, owed. It's the currency my family deals in. You owe us for taking you back. You owe us for watching the baby. You owe us for letting you live here. You owe us for being born at all. The only person no one ever seems to owe anything to is Noah. Meanwhile, my son was just there, 9 years old, worried about whether he'd get to keep his Saturday morning pancakes with Grandma, sensing the tension even if he didn't understand the words. One night he asked me out of nowhere, "Am I bad money?" I pulled the car over. "What?" I said. "Grandma said," he repeated, eyes fixed on the dashboard, "that you're mad because of his money, that I cost too much. Do I cost too much?" I wanted to drive back to that house and shake my mother. Instead, I took a breath. "You are not bad money," I said. "You are not a bill. You are my son. The money is supposed to help us take care of you. Grown-ups made mistakes. That's not on you." He nodded, small and serious. "Okay," he said. "Can I still have pancakes?" "Yeah," I said. "You can still have pancakes." But he opted to have them at our apartment more often after that. A year and a half later, my mother still hasn't gone to jail. She's on a repayment plan. She grumbles about it constantly. "The government is stealing my Social Security," she says, conveniently overlooking the irony. She's banned from ever being anyone's representative payee again. She tells people that's fine by me after what they put me through. But I see the way she looks at the card in my hand when Noah's monthly payment loads. Like it's something that used to belong to her that I took. My dad's health has stabilized. He and I have a weird quiet détente. He'll call me privately sometimes and say, "Your mother is under a lot of stress. She doesn't mean half what she says." I'll answer, "Maybe she should stop saying things she doesn't mean then." He sighs and changes the subject. We're all doing a dance around a crater, pretending the ground is still solid. Noah's benefits now go mostly where they should. I track every dollar. Not because I'm noble, but because I'm terrified of becoming anything like my mother. Rent, utilities, his share of food, therapy copays, sensory toys, gas for appointments. I keep a little ledger like it's 1950. Sometimes, when I'm really tired and the numbers don't stretch the way I want them to, I understand the temptation she must have felt. The money is there. The needs are endless. It would be so easy to say, well, the whole family is impacted by his condition, so it's all for him, really. But then I remember that 10-year-old me heard, "We can't afford summer camp," and accepted it. 9-year-old Noah stood in Walmart with me last year asking if we could buy the noise-canceling headphones he'd seen on YouTube, and I said yes because I'd found room in the budget, and watching his whole body relax the first time he wore them made it very clear what, for him, actually looks like. My mother and I are low contact now. She sees Noah when I feel strong enough to supervise and step in if she starts guilt-tripping him about all I've done. I don't let her be alone with his paperwork, or his doctors, or his school. I got a P.O. box for anything official. I changed every emergency contact form that used to have her name. Some days I feel like a cop guarding evidence. Other days I feel like a bad daughter for needing that guard at all. Because here's the part that makes my chest ache. I don't think she set out to be a villain. I think she was a tired woman in a broken system with a sick grandbaby in her arms and a lifetime of being told that mothers sacrifice everything. I think at first she saw his benefits as a way to keep the lights on, to buy extra groceries, to make sure there was gas in the tank to get him to the doctor. And then gradually the line between for him and for us blurred. Then between for us and for me. She was doing the labor, she reasoned. She deserved something. By the time I found out, she told herself that story for so long that anything else sounded like slander. She didn't steal. She managed. I blew that story up. For myself. For Noah. For every future where he might need records to prove his eligibility for something. For every other parent in that waiting room who thinks, it can't happen in my family. My mother says I betrayed her. My brother says I sent mom to collections over a clerical error, and that I love money more than family. An aunt told me she'd never forgive me if her daughter ever pulled something like that. On my worst nights, when the guilt creeps in and I see my mother's face the day she opened that repayment letter, part of me wonders if they're right. I picture her hands shaking, her pride in tatters, the whispers at church. I hear her voice saying, "You did this." And it lands right in the softest part of my chest. On my better nights, I look at Noah sleeping on his side, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, peaceful after a day where he got through school without a meltdown because his supports are finally what they should be. And I think I did this. I filed the form. I sat in that office. I took back what was his. I chose his future over her comfort. Both truths live in me at once. So that's my story, internet strangers. I'm the single mom who thought her disabled kid had been denied benefits and spent years stretching paychecks and skipping meals, only to find out at the Social Security office one random Tuesday that he'd been approved the whole time, that the checks had gone straight to her own mother's account for 12 years, that grandma had been using her grandson's SSI as a household slush fund while calling it sacrifice. I reported it. I became his representative payee. The government came knocking. My mother had to pay some of it back and lost her halo in the process. Now half my family thinks I'm a monster who turned her own mother in for money, and the other half avoids picking a side. I'm living with a mix of relief and regret, trying to build something stable for my son on ground that was finally painfully cleared. If you were in my shoes, if you found out your own parent had been quietly taking your disabled child's benefits for over a decade, lying about it, and then tried to guilt you into keeping quiet for the sake of the family when you confronted her? Would you have done what I did and reported the misuse, knowing it might wreck her reputation and finances and maybe even risk legal trouble? Or would you have kept it in the family, let it go as what's done is done, and tried to move forward, without blowing up the only support system you've ever really had, even if that support was built on your child's stolen future?